So just what is the future with Games Workshop? This is the question that like the past month I've really been asking myself. And I'm not really sure. In all honesty, I don't know if this is like the hype lead up in some strange way to Warhammer Plus, and they're just really aggressively looking to stamp out anything that might compete with Warhammer Plus. And then once it launches and becomes established and they've got that income stream, they're going to like step back down, kind of like the dawn of time when they just took the ban hammer to everything on BGG, all the files, all the Space Hulk stuff, all the fan stuff. I mean, they like obliterated it everywhere from that perspective. And certainly, you know, the internet was much smaller at that time, but that was a big move on their part. And it had a lot of repercussions. Most of it moved to Facebook and closed private Facebook groups. But from there, you know, Games Workshop moved on and we all kind of forgot. That's what I'm wondering right now. Once we get past this as a community, will Games Workshop tone it down a little bit? Or is this the continued march to something else? And the question that I was talking about with some friends, you know, we love playing war games physically, rolling dice, having fun, painting. But we also like complaining about war games and talking tactics and complaining about and talking about Games Workshop and other aspects that we like about the hobby. So we were just literally kind of wargaming things out and seeing where things go. And the question we had was, maybe Games Workshop is evolving to be a media company. They're getting away from miniatures, the opposite of Star Wars. That changes the algorithms, right? As soon as I invoke Disney and Star Wars. So the thought was this, and agree or disagree. I know I'm throwing kind of the meta out here. Star Wars starts out as movies, and that's the main aspect of the movies in like the 70s. I mean, I'm enough of a Star Wars fan, but certainly I don't live in that universe, so I don't know all the dates if that's heresy. But Star Wars movies, and then there's action figures and some other aspects of it. But the primary focus was the movies. And over time, those movies were a vehicle, as they became acquired eventually through Disney, to the point where now, as toys have come online, Lego sets have come online, collectibles have come online, theme parks have come online, one would say that the movies are a very, very small part of it. It's everything else. The movies were the vehicle that evolved to everything else that is Star Wars. That's now, you know, the crown of Disney, just the Death Star of Disney controlling that. Well, I see 40K and Games Workshop going in a similar model, only inverted, where it was about the physical product. It was about the models. And we're talking 40K now, but at the time, Warhammer Fantasy, or looking at Age of Sigmar. Lord of the Rings is kind of its own thing because it's a license, and they do well, but I wouldn't consider that primarily their IP, because at some point that relationship will change. But looking at their relationship, it was about selling miniatures. We're going to sell lots and lots of miniatures. Our focus is the miniatures, and really the rules are an excuse to utilize your miniatures. I see Games Workshop now switching that to saying, we want to be a media company. We want to sell Space Marine figures. We want to sell Space Marine apps on the App Store and various games. We want to sell board games. I mean, they still have a physical presence, and the push of 40K is miniatures. But are they seeing where, I don't want to say the writing on the wall, but are they seeing where, like, look, we need to evolve and we can make more by licensing out our IP while we produce it for ourselves. So if they do 40K Warhammer Plus, 40K movies, 40K books, 40K everything, and push that out where their revenue stream dominates more on media that you would consume. I see that more and more. And from a business perspective, you need to return to shareholders. It just makes sense to branch out. It's like if I'm a musician, I want to have eventually my clothing line, right? I hit critical mass of an audience, I launch my clothing line. I launch my line of vodka. I launch my line of whatever else that I'm going to put out. I mean, that's what you do as a business. You dominate more and more markets, leveraging your IP. It makes sense to move on and out from selling $80 miniatures for like 4. Okay, that's an exaggeration. $80 for 6, right? to other more lucrative markets. And the only way you're going to do that is to stranglehold the very content that helped you become where you are in the first place. The literal decades of free advertising that Games Workshop got from the fans. And certain things like, yes, if it was a blatant knockoff miniature, Chapter House, things like that, they had to squash. They tried going after that author because she used Space Marine. And they're like, well, we own Space Marines. Like, how can you own Space Marines? I mean, they've tried some wacky stuff in the past. They've tried some legitimate stuff in the past. But they did let a lot slide because they knew, look, the fans are generating free advertising. They're generating free momentum that feeds into our models. I mean, something as recently as when some of the 40K animation dropped, the Krieg animation, I'm watching that. I'm getting pumped. I went out and bought some models just watching that because I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm getting into 40K. Games Workshop made money off me because another hobbyist and enthusiast made a fan animation and they didn't even get a cut of it. Well, you'd say, well, look, it's not their IP, right? We can go back and forth with that. But Games Workshop made a lot off those animations, off the fan fiction, off the forums, going all the way back to the Facebook groups and everything. That worked as a miniature-based company, as a physical asset company. But now as they move into media and digital, literally stuff that does not physically exist, it still has to be created, you have to suppress that. You have to control that. You have to control the very piece of it. And this is before we get into, we also talked about 3D printing and other aspects that are a direct threat to their physical product. I don't know how that's going to shake out. I mean, the next 5-10 years is certainly going to be transformative of 3D printers. They're going to become kind of like replicators in some aspects. But from that, how much is that going to threaten? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I'm following it and I'm watching it with interest. And it'll be interesting to look back at some of the predictions and the ideas that we have. Being a futurist, how that plays out. But this shift that I see starting with Warhammer Plus, I think it is going to be different this time. I don't think it's just going to blow over once they launch. I think this is a new Games Workshop. I think they are pivoting their business model. They are expanding into new markets. They're like becoming like the Weyland Yutani of like the gaming universe. It's just pretty crazy with how that works. Agree or disagree?